Hello and welcome to Jessie Bear Book Club. We like to talk about historical fiction, wild cards, Game of Thrones, and much, much more. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Today I want to talk about a well-known historical fiction author, Anne O'Brien, and rate her books from my least favourite to my most favourite. Now, for complete honesty, I didn't actually read these books. I listened to them on audiobook. This isn't a paid promotion for Audible, I just really do enjoy audiobooks. The reason I listened to these books was because I always found Anne O'Brien's writing style very hard to get into. And I know many of my friends tried to read the books and felt exactly the same way. I once had a friend describe her books as dull, as if an old Victorian lady had wrote them. But I was very determined to read her books because they were on topics that I was very interested in. So I turned to audiobook. But I still managed to find some of her books very dull. Some of her other books are brilliant, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. So let's begin ranking the books from worst to best. Warning, spoilers ahead. In 11th place, The Queen's Choice. This book follows Joanna of Navarre as she comes to England to marry Henry IV. This book is incredibly dull. The back of the book hypes it up to be this political thriller, but very little actually happens in it. I was left feeling cheated by it, especially because I was given this book as a birthday present. The protagonist of this book, Joanna, is an absolute spoilt brat who is very concerned with status and wealth and abandons her children, and I found her incredibly unlikable. While she cared for her ill husband, she still remained incredibly self-absorbed, and I still couldn't like her even though I was meant to feel sympathy for her. In 10th place, The Uncrowned Queen. This book follows Philippa of Hainaut and is a good story of the older generation being overthrown by the new one, but this book ranks so low because it isn't long enough. It should have covered a longer time period. I also love Isabella of France, the she-wolf, and I don't like the way she is portrayed in this book, but that is only my opinion. In 9th place, The Queen of the North. This book follows Elizabeth Mortimer and is one of Anne O'Brien's newer books. But in my opinion it is also a bit dull. There isn't enough drama to keep the reader invested. The only interesting point of this book is Elizabeth and her husband Hotspur's marriage. Nothing else in this book is remotely interesting, and it ends on a cliffhanger, which I never like when it comes to books, especially when it hasn't been followed up. All that would have been needed would have been a short prologue to say what happened to her, but this was lacking. In 8th place, The Devil's Consort. This book follows Eleanor of Aquitaine and is definitely not dull. It is actually quite exciting, but is very historically inaccurate, which rubs me up the wrong way. It's a good bodice ripper, but there are far better books on Eleanor out there, especially Elizabeth Chadwick's series on Eleanor. I think maybe I already had an idea of who Eleanor was in my head when I read this book. And this book was so different to what I had already imagined that I just couldn't warm to it. In 7th place, The Virgin's Widow. This book follows Anne Neville and is very middle of the road. It's good but not excellent. Margaret of Ajoyne in this book is great and is probably the best portrayal of her I have ever seen. But Philippa Gregory's book, The Kingmaker's Daughter, is definitely a better version of the same story in my opinion. In 6th place, A Tapestry of Treason. This book follows Constance of York and is Anne O'Brien's latest book. I have just finished reading it. It was a very interesting narrative with a very unlikable main character. Constance is cold, rude and calculating, and almost inhuman, and though it was a very enjoyable book, I couldn't warm to her, and it spoilt the whole perspective of the book because she is the only POV character we have. In 5th place, The Forbidden Queen. This book follows Catherine de Valois, who is a very sympathetic character who I really empathized with. The middle of this book is a bit dull, but the beginning and end make up for it, and the ending is truly sad. Catherine and Owen's relationship is also very sweet, and I believe it was true love. In fourth place, The King's Sister. This book follows Elizabeth of Lancaster, and I feel it is a very good classic love story that ends in tragedy. I also enjoy their trip to Spain. In the book, having grown up in Andalusia, I love Spanish history. It also was realistic how a rebellious girl ended up conforming to the social norms of her age. And I found the death of her husband in this book very, very moving. I also thought it was a very realistic account of Richard II's reign, as Elizabeth managed to see both sides of the conflict. In third place, The Scandalous Duchess. This book follows Catherine Swinsford, the longtime mistress and then wife of John of Gaunt, one of the most powerful men in England during the Middle Ages. During her own time, Catherine was a scandal of Christendom, and a woman who rose through the ranks to become a duchess, and eventually grandmother to kings. I really enjoyed this book. There is very little modern historical fiction on Catherine Swinsford, and this book did a good job of portraying her and her story. One of Anne O'Brien's better books, in my opinion, and it has some truly human, moving moments that anybody could relate to who has ever been in a long-term relationship. In second place, The King's Concubine. This book follows the life of Alice Pears, King Edward III's long-term mistress, and though very historically inaccurate, it's a very good read. Though why Anne O'Brien chose to make Alice Pears ugly in this book, I will never understand. I have read a number of books about Alice Pears, and this is by far my favourite. But the fact that they made her ugly in this book does detract from the story and make it unrealistic that a king, one of the most powerful men in the world at that time, would have chosen this woman to be his long-term companion and mother to his children. But it is still a very good read, and I would recommend it. And in first place, The Shadow Queen. This book follows the fair maid of Kent, Joan, Countess of Kent, known to history as the Fair Maid for her beauty. She was the mother of Richard II and wife to Edward the Black Prince, one of the most formidable knights in history. This book is a very good, interesting read about a remarkable woman. I've always been interested in Joan, but there is very few books about her and her life. This book is wonderful. The protagonist is funny, kind, a little vain, but very likable, and I highly recommend it. It is set at the same time period as The King's Concubine, and the two women interact, making The King's Concubine a great addition to the story. But what do you think? Do you agree or disagree with my ranking of these books? Let me know in the comments below. And also let me know your thoughts on audiobooks, because I know people's opinion on audiobooks varies greatly. And remember to like this channel and subscribe to Jessie Bear Book Club for more historical fiction reviews coming very soon on this channel. Bye!